I want to continue in this whole look at the cross and like what happened there and why was it so significant. But here's how we're going to do it. I want to take a look today at an event before the cross. It happened the week of the cross, but several days before the cross. And it happened at a dinner party. And no, not that dinner party. We talked about that last week. Remember the Lord's Supper, the night before, or the night he was arrested, the night before the cross, what happened around that? There was actually a dinner before the dinner. It happened a couple days in advance. And there's this meat that was cooking over an open flame since the morning. It had just been slowly cooking. There was bread that had been baked, still hot, ready to be eaten. The hummus was there with olive oil and veggies, and there was an apple pie cooling on the shelf, I'm guessing. I don't know. I don't know a lot about that dinner. But actually, two people who were there wrote about this dinner and gave information so that we could know actually what happened there. If you have a Bible, open to Mark chapter 14. And if you open to Mark 14, Mark gives us an idea about what happened there. Also, John, he writes in John chapter 12 about the same dinner, but he gives us some different details, and he just gives us an idea about what happened there. The interesting thing is, even though both of them give different details to the same dinner, they both have the same landing point. And their landing point, it's a dinner to honor Jesus, where someone gave an extravagant gift. So in Mark 14, let me just tell you the key to the story. The key to the story is about who's there at the dinner. So here's what we know. From the book of Mark, we know that the dinner was at Simon the leper's house, not the leopard. Okay, it wasn't like a Halloween costume that went bad and like, oh, remember when you were the leopard for Halloween? Simon the leper. It's the leper, the disease of leprosy, which is weird that Mark would say something about it was at Simon the leper's house because he says it like Simon's there. And if Simon has leprosy, he's not there. Because when you got leprosy, you not only had a physical death sentence, you also had a social death sentence. If you've never heard about this, leprosy was this thing where you would lose feeling in your extremities and slowly your body would just kind of waste away. And oftentimes if the disease didn't eat your body away, because you would have no feeling, you wouldn't know when you cut yourself, stubbed your toe, or burned yourself, and slowly your body would start disintegrating and your fingers would become nubs. Nubs would barely become hands. You would slowly but surely waste away. But because it was contagious, it wasn't just a physical disease. You know what it was? It was a social disease. Because if anybody had leprosy, you were ostracized outside of your house, outside of your family, outside of your friendships, outside of your town. You had to live on the outskirts of society, that whenever you walked down a public place, you would have to declare unclean, so people would part the way, because what happens if they brushed up against you? You would give them this fatal disease. So Jesus and his disciples, they're having dinner at Simon the leper's house, which is kind of funny, like that Mark would write it that way. And it might just be a guy thing. You know, I mean, Mark's writing this. It might just be a guy thing because nicknames stick, right? Maybe they just always called him Simon the leper from like when he got that disease. The belief is that Jesus somewhere before this meal healed him, made him whole, and made him well. Some of you are still living down your nicknames, right? I was freshman year in college, and I didn't have enough common sense to know that caterpillar little fuzzy thing sitting on my lip was not a cool mustache. I couldn't even really grow a mustache. It was just like peach fuzz right here. And I'm sitting on my bed eating pistachios. And my roommate, Mark, is the most sarcastic person in the world. And he's like, hey, pass me some of those mustachio. And I didn't think it was very funny. And he cracked up. So for the next 4 years, I went by Mustachio. But that ended a long time ago. All right? I heard that name in the lobby after the last service. Like, we ain't going there, people. All right? Don't abuse my vulnerability with you. It has nothing to do with our message. I don't even know why I told you that story. The point is that maybe Simon the leper, whose house they were at, everybody just knew him. As, you know, I mean, he's STL. I mean, he's Simon the leper, and he just went by that. But the belief is that he's there at the dinner because he's no longer dirty and unclean. He's actually cleansed. Who else is there? We know this from the book of John as John writes about it. There's a guy by the name of Lazarus. Lazarus is there. And if you don't know Lazarus' story, he's got a great story. He was dead. And I don't mean like he was at a dead end in his life. I mean he was dead, not breathing, heart not beating. And I don't mean for like the 4 minutes of like, we brought him back and Lazarus is alive. No. He wasn't dead for 4 minutes. He was dead for 4 days. And his story is pretty amazing. Now, I told you Mark 14 is where we're going to read from eventually. But John records this in John chapter 12. You know where Lazarus' amazing story is about when he was brought back to life? John chapter 11. So Lazarus is brought back to life, and then they have this dinner that is done to honor Jesus for what it is he's done. Let me just tell you a little bit about Lazarus' story, just so you get the impact of this. Jesus is away on a business trip with his disciples, and Lazarus' hometown is in Bethany, which is actually where this dinner is taking place. It's the same hometown as Simon the leper. They all live in this town 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. Jesus is not there when Lazarus dies. Someone runs to Jesus and says, Jesus, you got to come. You got to hurry up because Lazarus, he's sick, and if you don't come, he's going to die. And Jesus is like, it's all good. Like, I'll get there eventually. Like, Jesus, no. Listen, you got to bust a move. It's actually in the Greek text. They used to talk that way back then too. You got to bust a move, Jesus, and get there or he's going to die. And Jesus just takes his own sweet time. And eventually when he walks into Bethany, Lazarus has been dead 4 days. John 11 tells the story. Let me read this to you. It might be on the screen up here. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said this, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. Time out. You got to get the relationships here, right? Lazarus is dead. He has 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. And they have an unusual relationship where they all love each other. You have brothers and sisters, right? This one's weird. They all like each other and love each other. So when Lazarus dies, Martha goes out there to meet Jesus as he's approaching the village. And he goes, where's Mary? Martha, in kind of loose terms, says, she's back at the house and she don't really want to see you. Jesus is like, call her. Bring her here. And the text is that when Mary reached the place where Jesus was, just outside the city, and she saw him, she falls at his feet. Now, I don't know if you have ever had a moment where you have just wept for days, and that moment where you just have to explain, this is what happened, Jesus, and your knees just give out, and you have fallen to your knees weeping, and she just tells him, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. And I've always wondered, like, what's she feeling in that moment? We know that she's just in utter despair, but was she angry with Jesus? Did she wag her finger at Jesus? If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Like, we don't know. We get the text, but we're not sure how she's feeling. But here's what's interesting. We know exactly how Jesus felt. In the text following, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And then Jesus, he walks his way to the tomb where Lazarus is buried, and Mary's there, Martha's there. There's a whole crowd of people. And Jesus just breaks down and weeps. I don't know if there's another verse in all of the Bible that describes Jesus being at this, okay, maybe him in the garden when he's praying right before he's going to go to get arrested and go to the cross, where he's in agony. But this is the second one, where Jesus is just weeping. And then what happens next is actually why they're having the dinner. Jesus tells them, I want you to roll the stone away. And they all look at each other. I ain't rolling the stone away. You roll the stone away. I'm not rolling the stone away. You rolling the stone away. I mean, we're not doing that. You know why? It's not like the stone's too heavy for them. They just don't want to smell what's inside. There's a dead body that's been in there for 4 days. And the text makes really clear, it stinketh, is how the King James puts it, right? And so that no one wants to open it. He's like, seriously, open it. Somebody does. And the next words Jesus speaks is amazing. He says, Lazarus, come out. He's wrapped in grave clothes. And he walks out, and everybody's just, Jesus, he actually has to tell them, hey, somebody unwrap him already. Like, set him free. Because they're just so amazed. They're like, I ain't touching him. And they set him free. Lazarus, who'd been dead for 4 days, Jesus calls him back to life. And that's in John chapter 11. And in John chapter 12, what are they doing? Oh, they're making him a meal. They're throwing Jesus this guest of honor party, and they're feeding Lazarus, because after 4 days, you're being dead, you're kind of hungry, I'm assuming. So they throw him this amazing dinner party, and that's the context. Simon the leper's there, and he's so grateful to no longer be diseased. It says this in Mark that that they're reclining at the table, so a very low to the ground type of table. There'd be cushions all around. You'd be resting on a cushion on one arm. Can you imagine Lazarus in that moment, like sitting down on that cushion and just laying there? Could you imagine Simon the leper sitting down? Like, it's his house. He's got a favorite cushion, a favorite spot. He's like, there's no way I ever thought I was ever going to sit in my favorite cushion again. And he's there relaxing at the table like life is, it's good. And both John and Mark, they let us know what happens at this dinner. It's this festival. It's not a fast food meal. This is a meal that's going to go on for hours and be savored and linger over because all that Jesus has done for them. There's another person there. Martha's there. And Martha, there's a couple places in the Bible where Martha's mentioned, and here's what's up. She is always in the kitchen. I'm not kidding. John chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him." Martha was in, ladies, I'm just saying this, okay? Martha was in the kitchen by choice, all right? I know some of you are like, she's always in the kitchen, man. They should have let her out the kitchen at some point. Like, that's just not cool. Like, why didn't the men help? She wanted to be in there, okay? You know why? That's her way of giving a gift to Jesus. She prepared this amazing meal. But it's interesting that Lazarus is there reclining at the table. You ever wonder what kind of questions they asked Lazarus? Like, okay, tell us again. Like, you were dead? Was there a bright light? Like, did you go to heaven? Like, what exactly happened there? I mean, it was 4 days. I mean, you had some experiences there, right? Like, and by the way, were you bummed at all that you had to, like, come back to life? Because, like, now you got to die again in order to go to heaven. Like, I don't know. Those are just things I think about that I would want to ask Lazarus about. Some of you are looking at me like, you're weird. Okay. So who else is there? Jesus' disciples are there. We'll get to them in just a minute. And then there's this person who's there that both Mark and John mention, and she's the center of the story. Now, Jesus is the guest of honor, but there's a person there who everything revolves around what she does next, and her name is Mary. Then some people, when they read the story, they're like, oh, that's that Mary Magdalene lady, the one who was super, super sinful, and Jesus forgives her and heals her and makes her all good. And no, wrong Mary. John lets us know it's actually Mary, the sister of Martha, who's in the kitchen cooking the meal. And they know Simon the leper, and they're the sisters of, yeah, see, some of you are with me. The sister of Lazarus, who Jesus just brought back to life. And here's what happens. If you have a Bible, Mark 14, verse 3. While Jesus was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. Stop there for just a minute. It doesn't say that it was Mary, but we know from John's record of it in John chapter 12, it is Mary, the sister of Martha, the sister of Lazarus. And she is this woman with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. That is a perfume from India that would be unbelievably expensive, as they're talking about. And here's what she does. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on Jesus' head. Here's how John writes about it. Let me just give you his version. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. Now, the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. I love the fact that when they talk about this perfume, like it's all about this perfume, right? They don't even say how much money it is. They just say it's worth a year's wage. And I just think it's such a fantastic statement because it just asks this, like, wow, Mary would take this gift, and she doesn't like unwrap the top and measure some and pour a little and be like, okay, it's worth a whole year's wages, which they don't say what that is. And I think it's fantastic because it begs this question. Would any one of us give Jesus a gift that is worth a whole year's wages? Whatever your wage is, or your wage is, or your wage is, would any one of us give Jesus a gift that's worth an entire year's wage? She doesn't take the cork and measure. She breaks the neck of the bottle because she is all in. There's not going to be a drop left. Pours it on his head, then down his body, on his feet. And in that moment, she takes her hair down. You don't do that, ladies. At least not back then. You can do that now. It's fine. But she takes her hair, which, by the way, it is actually recorded in historical books that you actually only ever took your hair down in front of your husband with no one else around, because it was the equivalent of being naked. And in this room with a bunch of male disciples, she is overcome and she just starts wiping his feet with her long hair. Oh. Now, you would think that in this moment, there'd be some who are like, wow, Mary, that was awesome. That was beautiful, what you just did for Jesus. And actually, the exact opposite happens. Remember I told you we would introduce you to the disciples who were there? Here's where they come in. It says in Mark 14:4, some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. The Greek text actually says this. They snorted at her. You have a snort too. Don't laugh at me. Everyone does. The minute that you think something was done that shouldn't have been done, like, oh, why would you do that? I mean, some of your snorts are a little more dignified. Like, you just... Some of you got full old snorts like, why would you do that? Like, but you have a snort. Should we all practice together? Ready? Just kidding. We'll avoid that. But you have a snort just like I do. That is that moment of disapproval that when someone does something that we think creates an awkward moment, that creates a, oh my gosh, why would you do that? That's the wrong thing to do. Why would you waste an entire year's wages of perfume and spend it on Jesus like that? And maybe they're thinking, oh my gosh, you just made Jesus feel really awkward. Your hair's down and Jesus is there feeling awkward as one of his disciples. Like, I know Jesus doesn't want to hurt your feelings, so I'm just going to tell you the truth. Because a lot of harm is done by people who think that they just need to share the truth with other people. And they rebuke her. Hey, Mary, back away, girl. Gift inappropriate. Your actions here, like, what are you thinking? By the way, who are these people? Jesus' disciples. Hey, make no mistake about this. There are some people who fall under the category as Christian that are unbelievably critical in a damaging way, and you wonder, is Jesus really on their side? I'll tell you what Jesus thinks of this in just a moment, but let's make clear, there's another guy there who's one of Jesus' disciples at the moment. His story is recorded this way, but one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, yeah, that Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. We know again, why do they keep stressing that? He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. John lets us know that Judas Iscariot is a creep and a crook. So Judas, right in the middle of this extravagant gift for Jesus, publicly shames her. Psst. Mary, what were you thinking? That was dumb. You could have, and then he gets all self-righteous. This is what you could have done. We could have sold that and given it to the poor. Even though John knew what he was really going to do. He was skimming off the top. He was going to keep it for himself. But here's what's interesting. It's super easy to throw Judas Iscariot under the bus and be like, oh, he's a loser, right? He betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Here's what's super unique. The very next story in the book of Mark, is Judas betraying Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. You could buy a slave in that day for 30 pieces of silver, this amount of money. It wasn't a year's wage. Judas betrays Jesus for this much. Mary honors Jesus with this much. It's pretty interesting. And in the midst of this story, we can throw Judas under the bus, but do you realize it wasn't just Judas who was doing that? It was the other followers of Jesus. The text literally says this: some of those present. There's more than one. They don't actually say it was Peter, James, John. I mean, they don't say who it was. They just said it wasn't just one. They're a bunch of followers of Jesus who criticize and mock Mary's gift. Why this waste of perfume? And they rebuked her harshly. There's a group of them that got super critical on Mary. So where does Jesus stand on this? Jesus steps up. I don't know if he's mad, but I think he's mad. And he says this: leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. And if you have a pen and you have a paper Bible, underline that. If you want to underline it in your digital Bible, highlight it, mark it in blood, whatever you want. Like, she has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. So Jesus isn't saying, hey, listen, don't worry about work with the poor. He's like, you will give to them, you have given to them, you will in the future continue to give to them, but please don't disregard the beautiful things she's done for me. Verse 8 says, she did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare me for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And for the last 2,000 years, this story has been told about this remarkably extravagant gift given by a remarkable woman. When I read about this, when I read stories like this, do you ever do this when you read the Bible? You're like, well, who do I most kind of connect with in the story? Who am I most like? I'd love to be like, oh, yeah, I'm like Mary, or I'm like Martha. None of us want to say that we are like stingy disciples, but can I just be really, really honest with you? I mean, I'm going to be whether you like it or not, so here we go. There's a stingy disciple that lives inside of all of us. Have you ever criticized when someone else gives thanks? I mean, do you know people who like, man, they write thank you cards for everything, or when instead of just being like, hey, thanks, they're like over the top in their praise and thanks, like, oh my gosh, that meant so much to me. And inside you're like, wow, it's a little over the top. Maybe that's not it. Maybe when you come into church and you come in and you sing songs, there's that person in front of you that feel like their hands are up in the air and they got a little groove to their worship too. And you're like, your hands are in the way of the screen. I mean, how am I supposed to sing? Like, seriously. Brother, it's a little over the top. Lady, it's a little over the top. And you snort disapproval, maybe not out loud, but you snort disapproval of why would you do it that way? It seems to be a little bit excessive. Have you ever heard someone from the stage say something like, let me just tell you how our family operates. We give 10% of everything that comes in right off the top, not even after taxes, there's 10%. That's what we give as a minimal gift. That's how we do it. And have you ever thought, wouldn't that be nice? Would that be nice to have that kind of discretionary income? And yeah, I would do that too if I had. And you snort in disapproval. And the assumption is that, oh, that's just discretionary income. What they're giving actually might be a significant sacrificial gift that they go without X, Y, and Z in order to do that as a sign of gratitude to God. And yet we criticize that. What about stories? Have you ever heard stories of people who go, listen, I actually live off of half of what I make. I give half of it away to charities, to the church, as just an act of worship to God. Maybe you've never met people like that. I have. And there's moments where some people just go, really? Or they think this very thought right here, like, oh my gosh, you give away that? Do you know what I could do with that? You know what I could do with that money? By the way, you're quoting Judas Iscariot at that moment. He said the same thing. John was telling you, he used to skim off the top. And so when this gift is given, he's thinking, do you know what I could have skimmed off the top of that? We have 2 ladies in our church currently right now who they've gone to school to become teachers. And what they want to do is they want to go to a Muslim country where they can teach English and also share Jesus with people. And you might look at these 2 young ladies in their late 20s who've done their education and go, wow, really? Like, why would you do that? It's not safe. You probably should do this or do that. And you might have a negative opinion of their dream and act of sacrifice to Jesus and just go, why would you? There's an awful lot of people who claim to be God's people, and yet we snort and criticize other people's gifts. And if I'm going to make this statement this way, can I just be really, really honest with you? Here's mine. I look at sometimes when missionaries go off to serve in some pretty hard, remote places, and they take their kids with them, and I just kind of go, does the kid have a choice? Was it his idea? Did he want to go? Assuming that, wow, mom and dad are really ready to make this sacrifice, and I just kind of want to know, is the kid up for it? Can I be really honest with you? Okay. What's said here doesn't stay here. It's online, right? But whatever. When a missionary family goes out and they do that, and then they have their kids go to boarding school while mom and dad are hundreds of miles away at another place, there's something in me that just goes, dude, God gave you those kids for you to raise, not for somebody else to raise. And forgive me, listen, someone's act of sacrifice I'm critical of. I just tell you that, and I'm kind of ashamed of that a little bit, but at the same time, I just tell you that because of this. There's a little bit of a stingy disciple that lives inside me, and I'm guessing I'm probably not the only one. Do you ever have an area of your life where you look at somebody else and go, why would you? Because I think sometimes we think, oh, it's too much. It's extensive. It's over the top. It's overboard. But you know what's hard? It's hard for us to admit that we're stingy because there's actually no good connotation of the word stingy. They're all negative. And we would like to say, oh, listen, no, I'm just Dutch, and so I have some really conservative views of money, right? Also known as stingy. And all the Dutch people are like, shut up, stop it. Is there something that you and I might be stingy towards God about? It might be our time. You hear stories about people come up front like, hey, for the last 20 years, man, I've been serving in this capacity at this church every week. And you might go, might be nice, man, have that kind of discretionary time. What makes us think that they have that time available? Isn't that the funny thing? Time is the equal opportunity moment. We all have the same amount. They don't have more time than you do. They're sacrificing something to do that, but we can criticize it like, oh yeah, I just don't have any time. You actually have the same amount of time. So here's the key to this story. Because it got really quiet in here. You okay? You're like, we're okay. You just called us all stingy. Yeah. But it's actually only halfway through the story. Because there's a moment in here that you have to ask this question. Why was Mary so extravagant in her gift towards Jesus? And if you can answer this, this is the key to the story. And the key to the story is connected to who's around the table. I'll give you 3 reasons why I think she was overly extravagant in her gift towards Jesus. Number 1, she saw the effects of how Jesus made a person clean. She knew Simon the leper. And he was clean and returned to his family, healed from leprosy. But listen, Mary, she's on the other side of the cross than where you and I stand. She didn't know about the cross. She didn't know about the resurrection. So you and I stand on this side of the cross and the resurrection. And there is a cleansing that happens for anyone who accepts that Christ died for them. And you receive that gift. You don't have to carry shame, guilt. You don't have to carry these boundaries between you and your family about, I don't want to talk anymore. Because no. I've watched families come back together from social ostracization. I didn't say that right. Broken families restored because of the cleansing that Jesus offers on the cross. We're no different than Mary. Second thing, Mary saw the effects of how Jesus makes a person clean is number one. The second one is Mary experiences Jesus saving someone from death and giving them new life. Not only did she see it in someone, but it happened to someone that she deeply loves. The reason Mary's gift is so extravagant is because her brother was saved from death. Hey, if you're a follower of Christ, you were saved from death. You've gone from death to life, an eternity where you are going to be separated from God forever, because that's what you wanted on earth. You didn't want a relationship with God on earth, and so whatever you wanted on earth, that's what you get in eternity. And if you trust Jesus, that his forgiveness will give you new life, you get relationship with him today, and you get relationship with him in eternity. Mary looked at her brother who was given new life. Now stop for a minute. Look at yourself in the mirror. If you're a follower of Christ, you're looking at someone who's been given new life. Parents, if you have kids who've accepted Christ, eternity in heaven, your kids, your grandparents, if you're grandparents, you look at your grandkids, they're going to be there with you. You can say, my parents are now saved. Like, you've experienced people moving from death to life. Are we any different than Mary, where we can turn around and just say, Jesus, I have extravagant gratitude for what you've done? Third, why was Mary's gift so extravagant? Mary knew Jesus loved her personally. I would have to go all the way back to John chapter 11. In the moment that Jesus saunters into town and Lazarus is still in a tomb, Martha goes out to meet Jesus. And Jesus is like, where's Mary? She don't want to talk to you. And Jesus says, go call her. Tell her that the teacher wants to see her. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to say, hey, go get Mary. I want her to be a part of this. I want her to see this. I want her to see her brother come back to life. He could have said, where's the tomb? Let's go do this thing. I got this. And he doesn't. He calls her personally. Listen, if you're a follower of Christ, you've recognized what Jesus did on the cross for you. You've accepted that. You received eternal life and forgiveness. We say, oh, you found Jesus. Can I just be really, really clear about it? You didn't find Jesus. He found you. He set people in your life, churches in your path, messages on your iTunes account. You didn't find him. He found you. It's personal. It was personal when Mary got invited into this story with Jesus. And we're no different. It's personal to us. I think we're like Mary. If you're a follower of Christ, I mean, you've seen people cleansed. You've been cleansed. You've seen people saved from death to life. You've seen loved ones experience it. And it's personal. He came and found you. So my guess is this: if you're a follower of Jesus, I'm just guessing, every single one of us has experienced moments where we go, God, I am so grateful. But make note of this. I don't ever preach so that you get more information. It is not the point of preaching. It's not the point of reading the Bible. It's just to get more information. Information is a stepping stone for that next major moment of transformation. And transformation asks this question, so what are you going to do about it? Because I believe this. If you're a Christian, you've had a moment of tremendous gratitude. But here's the problem. All of us have had moments of extravagant gratitude slip away from us. Because, well, number one, we just get busy. You ever been sitting in church and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for what God has done. And about 4 seconds later, you're going, I wonder where we're going to eat for lunch. You're laughing because it's true. Or maybe you are sitting there, you're reading your Bible, maybe you're journaling because that's kind of who you are and what you do, and God makes something so clear in you, like this gratitude wells up in you, and all of a sudden, zzz, your phone rings. And the next thing you know, you've sent 4 texts and watched 6 YouTube videos, and you're like, what was I doing? It's because we just get sidetracked and we get busy. I think all of us have had moments of extravagant gratitude slip away because of this. Number 2, I think we just get practical. We think, oh my gosh, God, I want to express this way. But then we think, if I do that thing to thank Jesus, it means I can't do this. And that means there won't be enough money for that. Or we just get practical. If I offer my time there, I won't have enough time to do this. Listen, there is nothing practical about Mary's gratitude. It's a year's wages. I just wonder if we had a year's wages liquid on our shelf. I mean, all puns intended there, liquid on the shelf. Would you give that to Jesus? I mean, and not begrudgingly. I'll talk about this in just a moment. But like this spontaneous moment of this isn't practical, but this is what I'm going to do. Sometimes we have those moments of gratitude and they get missed because we get self-conscious. Self-consciousness has a voice, and the voice always sounds like this. What will people think if I did that thing, if I sung that way, if I worshiped this way, if I prayed on my knees in church like that, if I thanked Jesus by giving away my time and this, my money this way? What if and by the way, the voice always has a face connected to it. And sometimes it's, what would my parents think if? What would my spouse think if? What would my kids think if? What would my kids think if I gave away part of their inheritance? Oh my gosh. Sometimes moments of extravagant gratitude, they just slip away because if we're really honestly, here it is, ready? We just get stingy. We have the same thought that Judas had. Do you know what I could do with that extra time, with that extra effort, with that extra money? One of the writers who is writing commentary on this, here's what he writes. He says, among the tragedies of life are the times we are moved to do something fine or noble, and we do not do it. Instead, we yield to, he puts this in quote, common sense or the busyness of life. We ignore the impulse to write a letter of appreciation or the prompting to tell someone we love them or the urge to give to a need. Thus, the possibility of a thing of beauty is gone forever. So here's what this begs. We're going to wrap this up. You ready? What do you think God might be inviting you to do in response to all he's done for you? And maybe it's an act of extravagant gratitude. If you're going to, let me just show you what prompted Mary and what kind of supported her gift. And maybe as I ask this, maybe there'll be some clarity. Mary's gift was beautiful, is what Jesus said. But it was beautiful because of this. Number one, it was prompted by God. It was a response out of what Jesus had done for her. So let me just ask you this. What has God done for you? We've spent weeks looking at the cross and who Jesus is and what he endured on the cross and the implications of the cross, that our life is lived in response to the cross. So what has he done for you? Would you linger over that this week? Mary's gift was beautiful because it was inspired by love. When she breaks that jar, takes down her hair, it is just pure energy, spontaneous love that is driving her. There's nothing in the story that hints that she thought, well, do I have to do this? I mean, she actually did the unexpected thing, the thing that everybody else said, don't do that. Why would you? She is just inspired by her love for God. Listen, I think maybe the wrong question is, what do you think Jesus wants you to do? Maybe you could ask the question, what does your love inspire you to do? What is the gratitude that wells up in you want you to do? The third thing is it was spontaneously impractical. If you have in your mind how you want to show extravagant gratitude, I guarantee a voice will go off in your head. It could be your mom's voice, your spouse's voice, your Dutch voice. It's going to say that's too much. If you give away your time, don't you know what you could have done with that time? If you give away that amount, you know what you could have done with that? There wasn't nothing practical about this. I know it was in response for Jesus' burial she didn't even know was coming. Fourth thing, Mary's gift was beautiful because it was personal and sacrificial to Mary. Do yourself a favor, don't give Mary's gift. I don't know, ladies, maybe you got this super nice bottle of perfume at home and you're like, yes, that's what I should do. Mary did that because the text said this. Jesus said this. He said, Mary did what she could do. She had it. It was on her shelf. It was hers. She could do whatever she wanted with it. Well, that was specific to Mary. Well, what do you have? I'm guessing you probably don't have a perfume bottle on your counter worth a whole year's wages. I'm just guessing, maybe. But what is unique to you and personal to you and sacrificial for you. Have you ever had people come to you and say, hey, we have this good cause going on. Would you help us with? And your thought, I have the same thought sometimes, is ask me to write a check. Because if I write a check, it's just way easier than giving you more of my time. Because my time is way more precious than writing a check for $50 or even $100. I just think it's extravagant for Mary and beautiful for Mary because it was personal and sacrificial to her. Let me finish this up. Mary's gift was beautiful because it was socially risky. Let me make this really clear. There might be moments in your life where you just come before God and say, this is my gift to you. There will be some people who go by the name of Christian who will not agree with you, may mock you, may ridicule you. So what? Don't play to the audience of what people will approve you for. Don't do it for what they will applaud you for and cheer you on for. You give what is personal to you, to Jesus, to express your gratitude. And can I just say what some of you are thinking right now? You're like, I bet you the pastor's going to take an offering after this. Yeah. It ain't about that. I'm not here to ask for money today. I don't want your money. God doesn't even want your money. Which brings me to this very last point. Jesus loved her gift because it was all those things. It was personal, it was special, it was sacrificial. He doesn't want your money, he wants your heart. This gift of Mary was an expression of her love and gratitude to God. I just want that for you. To express your love and gratitude to God for who he is and what he's done for you. Because I think in that moment, Mary felt most alive. And I think you and I long for that. So, what will you do? I just want to be your cheerleader and encourage you to go for it. Sing like that. Worship like that. Pray like that. Give away your time like that. Find a need in the community like that. Give away stuff like that. Give away money like that. The question I think becomes, what has God done for you? And how might God be inviting you to show extravagant gratitude for making you clean and bringing you new life? I think it's such an important part of the Christian life that both John and Mark record it for us to be remembered 2,000 years later so that we might ask that question. And maybe Jesus will look at you and go, he has done a beautiful thing for me. She has done a beautiful thing for me. Because in that moment, I think you'll feel most alive. Let's pray. God, I often pray at the end of these to just say thank you for what it is that you've given us. And the minute that the word thank you comes out of my mouth, I just know this, like it feels insufficient. It feels so much less than it should be. So God, I don't know how to say thank you to you for all you've done. But God, I believe if we reflect on the cross and all you've given us through that cleansing and new life, Lord, that in that moment, you're going to open our eyes and we'll be overwhelmed with gratitude for you. And I pray you would do that for us. God, overwhelm us. And let us not hinder what flows from that we would express great praise and gratitude and thanks to you. God, thanks isn't enough. So give us wisdom. Give us the courage. Give us focus to do things that other people might call us crazy for, that just show you how much we love you. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.